Welkom iedereen bij weer een mooie sessie van werkgeluk.tv. En deze keer hebben we de schrijver van dit fantastische boek. Hij komt uit Engeland, dus so we're gonna talk English from now on. We have Nic Marks here. He just wrote this book, and I think it's one of the nicest books on happiness at work that I've laid my eyes on. I've read hundreds of books, but this book is really very clear. It makes an incredible good point about why we should use happiness at work in companies, within companies. And one of the questions I was wondering, Nic, and I want to start with that, why did you start writing this book? Because there's so many books about it, why did you thought about, I have to write this book? What was the idea behind it?
Well, I've been working on work for about the last 10, 12 years. So previously, before that, I worked in public policy, measuring quality of life and well-being for 15, 20 years. And I started to work on work 2012. Well, my first piece of work was sort of 2008, but started committing to working on work. And so I've been doing it about 10 years. And I thought I better capture this because I think I just had a slightly different take than most people on it. I mean, it's similar but different. And some things I feel very strongly about, like how we should measure happiness in the workplace. And I wanted to sort of make my case. So it did take me 3 years to write. So
Yeah.
so there's a little bit of a gap between when I thought I should write it and when it's finally come out. But I'm getting older. I was 60 last year, and you start thinking, well, I better tell people what I've done. So that's kind of it. I would recommend people some books, but I always thought it's not quite exactly what I mean, Sean Akers or yours or other people's. And so I just thought I better write my way. And so that's how it started. Yeah.
Yeah. And in what way is it different then?
I think that I take a more immediate take on happiness. I'm very keen that we think of happiness as a signal
Yeah.
that when happiness for me, I mean, there's a broad church of definitions of happiness, but I don't like the idea that it's a state we get to, like it's a beach that we get to and we lie on and everything is okay now. All of our unhappiness is behind us because life isn't like that. Life is very up and down. And so I'm interested in happiness as a signal that when we feel good, things are going well, or when we feel bad, things aren't. So it's a sort of alignment between our inner and outer worlds, that they're aligned. So we in that way you can statistically capture it. I'm a statistician, that's interested to me. You can start using it as an indicator, which is showing you very quickly how teams are doing in your organization. So that very immediate, very dynamic, fluid idea of happiness is what really interests me.
Yeah. And why should companies go for happiness and not for, you got a lot of things you can measure. Are people interested in work, or are they engaged, or those kind of things? Why would people choose specifically happiness?
So the word engagement
Yeah.
is sort of a made up word. I mean, it's from a 1990 paper, is it, by someone Khan? And maybe you can remember exactly who it is, but there's a very specific paper
Hmm.
where someone starts to use it in the work context in the way that we have started to use it now. And, if we're honest, engagement is really just a code word for productivity. It's sort of a corporate code. Oh my, are they being productive? And that's a really understandable need from the organizational perspective because it's difficult for an organization because they effectively rent an employee's time,
Hmm.
in the sense of pay them and the employee brings their time and effort. So the employer can measure the time, but the effort is what they're also interested in, or the value add that they're interested in. And engagement is a way of trying to approach that. However, the way it lands for an employee is, can we get more out of you and pay you the same money? Sort of thing. What's in it for me? What's in it for me for engagement, right? Now, then you move into terms, so the term well-being, is that widespread in the Netherlands?
It is. It's getting a little bit traction. Yeah,
Yeah,
welzijn. Yeah, we call it. Where
yeah.
welzijn. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So well-being is a word that I have worked under for a long time. I founded the Centre for Wellbeing at think tank New Economics Foundation. I've done national accounts of well-being. I've done 5 ways to well-being. So lots of work in it. In certainly in the English speaking world, it's got a little stale as a word,
Hmm.
well-being. It's got a little corporatized. It's also a little difficult to interpret in that what does it mean precisely? Does it mean my physical well-being? Does it mean my emotional well-being, my mental well-being? I'm not even sure I know what the difference between emotional and mental well-being is. Does it mean my spiritual well-being? Some people will use it. So it's very broad. So if I ask somebody in a survey, how is your well-being? They're not really going to give me an answer, or they may give me an answer, but people might be answering it in very different ways. Whereas you use a word like happiness, how happy were you at work? Are you at work? Well, I can answer that. I mean, particularly when you time bound it. So if you say happy were you at work this week, this month, if you put a time bound around it, then people can give you a very solid answer. They know exactly instinctively it goes up and down, which is kind of what I want as an indicator. So I think it taps into it more. It's got a very nice emotional tone to it as a word. I
Hmm.
think there are other possibilities. How much do you enjoy your work? You mentioned the word interest. How interesting is your work misses out some of the breadth of happiness. Happiness will include interest, but it will also include connection and relationship and meaning. So I have come to embrace it, and I didn't start with this word. I started to use it more and more on from about 2006, and then I've sort of totally almost dropped using the word well-being and just use the word happiness now.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah. And is there, of course, happiness is really nice for employees to have.
Yes, yes.
I mean, like happiness, people want happiness in general in their life, with their spouses, with their children, and also with work. But is there also a connection, from the organizational perspective? Why would
Yeah.
is it only something which is nice for the employees, or is it something which is also connected to other things, to something like things like productivity and
I mean, totally. That's the whole
mm,
what magic of it really is that because when we feel good, we do good work.
mm,
And so it's as simple as that, really. I think we all know, if we feel miserable, we do miserable work, and we feel good, we do good work. And that is where all the gain is for the organization. And you can think of that at all levels. So if you're a senior leader, this is going to be about probably the two major indicators you worry about, productivity and staff retention. It's going to improve staff retention, it's going to improve productivity. If you are a team leader, and a team leader is always squeezed from the top, they've got a lot of pressure, they've got the pressure of their team from below, then it's also really in your self-interest because leading an unhappy team is a pain. So
right? Yeah.
it's really good. I mean, I in the book I talk about the sort of nautical idea, which again I don't know if this translates into Dutch, but we say, he runs a happy ship.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a high compliment to a captain. You run a happy ship because the crew aren't going to be mutinous. They're not going to throw you overboard. They're not going to rebel. And it's the same in a team. If you run a happy team, your life is going to be much easier, and you're going to meet your business goals better. I mean, it's got to be the two of these things. Happiness can't just be about employees. It has to be about work. It is about happiness at work. It's not about happiness in general life. We're talking about happiness at work. There is work to be done. So it's about creating a positive, productive culture, and and happiness and productivity go together. My estimate in the book is that happy teams are 20 to 30% more productive than unhappy ones.
Yeah.
And I don't know, do you know Jean-Emmanuel Denis? Do you know,
Yeah.
do you know him?
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Well,
I like his book too.
Oh, very
Yeah.
good. It's a lot more dense than mine, but and more academic. And I
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely
It's different.
cite
It's
it,
very different. Yeah. Yeah.
cite it in the book. I really respect his work, and of course, Jean Emmanuel, being a good academic, will only cite beta coefficients when he starts talking about the correlations. And so,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're very hard for a lay person to interpret. And a beta coefficient. effectively is that old equation from school where x equals a plus b times y, and the beta coefficient is the b of the b times y. So if you get a beta coefficient of 0.42, it means if your y variable goes up 1, your x variable go up 0.42. So it's about it's the size of impact, but it doesn't really help you understand it easily. So I went through all the data and looked at the difference between high and low performing teams, and I think it's 20 to 30%. That is a whole analysis of how I got to that. And actually, I saw Jean-Emmanuel Denis 2 weeks ago,
Hmm.
and I was giving him my book, and I showed him this figure, and he goes, "Oh yeah, that's about right." I thought that'll do for me, for him, because I am putting a sort of marker in the sand with that figure that I think people could and should quote because I'm very confident of it. But it was very nice for him to go, "Oh, I think that's about right." So
And do you also think, because one of the things I often hear is, if people are successful, they are more happy. But do happy people get more successful, or do they get more productivity? Is it like a causal relationship? Are you sure about that? Do you know what I mean?
yeah, I mean, happiness and at work, team happiness is a complex system. It's very dynamic. There's a lot of cause and effect are entwined.
Hmm.
In a pure sort of systems way, you call it a wicked problem, which is where cause and effect entwined. It's difficult to identify the effect sizes. However, what we do know, well, one, there's a classic paper from 2011 by Jim Harter, who was the chief scientist at Gallup. In that time, Gallup used to be a little bit more open with their data than they've become. And he had a paper which was tracking, I'm not going to remember the precise figures, but he had hundreds of thousands of people in this study, and thousands of business units. And he tracked their performance and what he called their perceptions of work, effectively their positive and negative perceptions of work. And he looked at it time one and time two. They were at least 6 to 9 months apart. And he did looked at the correlations through time, still correlations, and showed that the correlation coefficient from happiness at work to future financial, sorry, I'll do it this way, from happiness at work to future financial was twice as strong as the one from financial to happiness in the future, the beta coefficient. So in that way, he concludes quite clearly that the effect is twice as strong from work perceptions to performance as the other way around. So they both exist, they're both significant, but twice as strong. And then you can look at
So
Jean
there is a
Emmanuel.
smoking gun.
He has a smoking gun, and I mean, people say correlation doesn't equal causality. They're right, but it's a strong hint, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
and and
Oh,
and the best piece of research is by Jean Emmanuel himself, which is this study of BT call
yeah,
operators.
yeah, yeah. That's about
Um,
the weather, right? The difference
the-
between,
yeah,
yeah.
and this to Jean Emmanuel, and I agree with him, is a proof of causality.
Okay, okay.
Okay, which is that they were looking at the happiness, the weekly happiness of call operators in a BT call center,
Yeah, yeah.
and how did their mood affect how much they sold. And they showed that happier call operators sold, I think it was 12 or 13% more in a week, which is actually a relatively small effect. It's not the 20-30 that I normally find, but you've got people just on a telephone, just their tone of voice, no eye contact, no prospecting, no relationship with the customer. So it's very, very narrow, no teamwork. So it's 12, 13%. So it's at small end. And they showed that relationship, just as you say, that could be happiness to sales or sales to happiness because it's the same week. The way they separated it was that they looked at the weather, the British weather, which of course is very
Yeah,
variable.
yeah. Lots of rain.
Well, but there's lots of sunshine, and so
Yeah,
the
also, yeah.
weekly weather affects our mood as a nation.
Mm.
And they showed that in sunnier weeks, call operators became happier and they sold more. And that causality can't work the other way because you can't be happier and make the sun shine. That's
Yeah,
impossible.
yeah, 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 yeah.
The
Correct.
effect sizes became smaller. He's talking about a 2 to 3% effect because that's not the only thing that affects their mood, but it was absolutely, you could trace the line through. And so that absolutely shows it's going that way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's good. That's good. That's really good. Um, what I want to do is, I asked some people in my network,
Yeah.
if you could ask one question to you,
Yeah.
what would you ask? So what I did is and I will share it with everybody. This is your book, by the way,
Yeah.
Happiness at Work, and this is the content of your book. But we're gonna have a look at at the questions, and the questions were from different people,
Yeah.
people with a HR background,
Yeah.
leaders, um, even from hospital. There was a cardiologist,
Yeah.
and he's actually doing some great work at his hospital. So there's some in Holland, people really embrace the whole thing about happiness at work. A lot of people
Yeah.
are working on it. And one of those questions is about, what he said. I think this is the one from the hospital. Is many policies are designed for the average employee. How can an organization translate well-being policy into practical action for the individual? I have some ideas about it, but do you have some ideas about it?
Yeah. So I think, and I said this to you in the chat before we were chatting online, that questions are more interesting than answers.
Hmm.
And I think that the whole space of happiness and well-being is facilitative rather than prescriptive.
Hmm.
Is that we're working with energy, and as soon as you get prescriptive,
Hmm.
you sort of moved out of the space. Everything is a dance between
Yeah,
the individuals, the team, the organization,
yeah,
and so it's about being adaptive to what's going on, is what happiness and well-being is. As I said, strictly it's an indicator between the inner and out. Well, for me, strictly the inner and outer self. So my inner self and outer. So you're always dealing with individuals, and if you're a team leader, it's about creating the dialogue between you and the
yeah,
individual.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I completely agree.
yeah.
Yeah,
So, but we know some steers, okay? Just because everyone is different, we also share a lot of similarities. So we can, and this is where it gets sort of kind of interesting. So I do things like I message 5 ways to team happiness,
yeah,
and they are connect, be fair, empower, challenge, inspire.
yeah,
Now, what I am doing then is I'm I mean, like it's not that dissimilar from Maslow or Marty Seligman's PERMA. Slightly different from his. He mixes means and ends actually, because anyway, that's a different matter. I very much like to separate the end, which is the outcome, which is happy or successful, and then the drivers of that. So these 5 things are drivers, but I articulate them as positive actions you can take. But really, I'm inviting people to connect, to be fair, to empower, to challenge, to inspire. And it can be so many different ways you can do those things.
mm,
So that is where the space is. So there's the sort of guide guidelines, keeping people.
yeah. There are some general guidelines we can
Yeah,
use, and
yeah,
that's what we will share. And there are also some differences. What we also use, I don't know if I couldn't find it in the book, but what we also use is the personality.
yeah,
We take a look at the big five,
yeah,
and you can use it also if you're a team leader or if you're in HR. If you take together with the employee, of course, take a look at the big five scores, the personality scores, you get quite a good idea about what people need to flourish.
yeah,
If people are really extroverted, they need more other people to flourish. If
yeah,
they are introverted, they need more. You got all those, the 5 different factors:
yeah.
openness, sensitivity to negative emotions and neuroticism, conscientiousness. Let me, I have to, openness.
Agreeableness.
Yeah, agreeableness. So, and those 5 things, they're very different for each individual. I also
Yeah,
see that they're quite a little, some people really like it to get together and to work together, and other people really need their time on their own. Um,
yeah.
so there are quite a lot of differences between people. Yeah.
You're quite right. I don't get into that at all in the book,
Yeah.
and I am very focused on the team and the systemic. And I mean, one of the reasons I've written it is it's for people leaders and senior leaders in organizations, and it's looking at how you create a system that does
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And there's an the team is the smallest system, and I think that we're often shaped more by systems than we realize. And so, and if you shape a team, you get to the individuals, and you see it goes sort of downwards and upwards and outwards. So that was my aim with the book. I think it's, it's fair to say that, yeah, there's other happiness and well-being interventions that I don't cover at all.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I
No, but
think my,
I think a combination would be great,
yeah,
to
yeah,
system with also to see for the
yeah.
the differences. That okay. Let's have I think this is also a nice question. This is from one of the HR people from HR in my network. How can leaders deal constructively with the downs, moments of stress, fatigue, or demotivation in their teams, and without falling into micromanagement or forced positivity? Uh,
Yeah.
I think this is an important point. Also, because some people think about, when you talk about happiness at work, they start, talking about um, compliments only, and the focus is only on positivity.
Yeah.
I think there's more than that. How would you answer this question?
Well, I mean, the first thing is that setbacks are a part of life, aren't they?
Hmm.
And how we deal with them is partly, how resilient we are, how functional we are. So there will be stress, there will be setbacks. I mean, these are quite different. Moments of stress to fatigue and demotivation are actually different things. Moments of stress are typical and not necessarily negative. Fatigue is a long, that's sort of heading towards burnout, and demotivation is when there's no energy. And so downs are different. So if we go back to that idea for me of happiness is a signal that when things are good, we're doing well. When they're bad, what that means is that actually unhappiness is functional because it is a signal to change. So if we're unhappy, we actually have energy to change, right?
Yeah.
And that might be a moment of stress. There's energy there. Whereas the problem is more in between, that when you get stuck in, I call it stuck in okay, that when you're sort of just flat, that's where fatigue and demotivation really come in, when you're continually down.
Yeah.
And that is problematic, and more dangerous because there's no energy to change. There's energy to carry on when you're happy. There's energy to change when you're unhappy. And how do you constructively deal with them? Well, I think it is about finding out, what's holding people back. Is it workload? Is it interpersonal relationships? Is it bad IT systems? I mean, that's an
Yeah.
underdiagnosed unhappiness.
We all know.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I think that you don't deal with stress and fatigue with forced fun. No. In fact, I've got a chapter in the book called Pizza, Ping Pong, and Parties, and it's
Yeah.
how they don't work. And my big tip for dealing with stress in the moment is a mnemonic and it is learning from an unlikely source, which are smokers. And smokers are very good with dealing with short-term stress. Okay, they're slowly killing themselves with carcinogens, which isn't so great, but I'd make a mnemonic out of it. And what it is virtually every hour a smoker will stop what they're doing. They will get up from the desk and move their body, and they will go, oh, outside, which is good for them, although the fresh air would be better than the smoke. They kickstart conversations with other people. And then they exhale for longer than they inhale. They basically do mindful breathing. I mean, are you a smoker? Have been a
No,
smoker?
no, 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 no. I
I never was. But when you,
did it
maybe
years
you
ago,
think,
but I'm very happy I stopped that. I really
okay, but you
recognize
did it.
the breathing thing. It's such an important part.
Yeah.
To,
When they're smoking, they sort of kick back and they look really blissed out. Well,
yeah,
they are doing mindful breathing just with smoke or
absolutely.
vape. And then are they relaxed? And that spells smoker. And so I think we can have techniques for dealing with moments of stress.
Yeah,
Longer term fatigue and motivation need a deeper dive intervention into what's causing that.
yeah,
Uh, and it's not going to be dealt with false fun. No.
yeah, yeah. No, I completely agree. I also know of a very interesting intervention. What you can do in your team is to to ask people if they have um, a question for other people, so that they can help each other.
Yeah.
And that's not like giving each other compliments, but that's that you give other people in your team the opportunity to help you.
Yeah.
And if you could do that, I know some research
Nice.
on that. That it's also stimulating the altruism part,
Yeah.
which has a positive effect on happiness. And but it's not on the forced positivity part, but it's really on helping each other. And then you also become more aware of your strength, and no, it's got
Yeah.
a nice impact on teams.
I'd like you to send me that. That's a really good thing because I think of it the other way. I think about saying thank you for the support I've received,
Yeah, yeah,
and that's something I put quite a lot on it. But that's really sweet. That's nice that
yeah,
people should ask for
yeah,
help.
absolutely. And it also makes you a little bit vulnerable, you know.
Yes, yes.
And you
That's
have to ask something because there's something you don't know, and that's very really great to do for leaders also, in like management teams. Uh,
yeah. I like that very much. I haven't thought of
yeah,
articulating it
and I
that
know
way. That's
some
very good.
research in which shows the positive effect on your team spirit, the
Yeah.
positivity in team. Uh,
Which is what Barbara Fredrickson calls positivity resonance.
yeah,
How does things bounce around? So I can see it
yeah,
doing that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, we talked about this one actually already,
Yes.
right? I think we quite covered it.
Yeah. I mean, the word correlation there. You did show me this question before, and I thought actually it's always going to be a correlation, but it's a
Yeah,
causal correlation the way that they
yeah,
show it
yeah,
because you can't
yeah,
have
yeah,
because it's separating out that cause and
yeah,
effect, which is
yeah.
difficult.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is really great. It's
Yeah.
I had some extensive conversation on LinkedIn
Yeah.
with really thousands of people, sharing and working on it, and so that's really great. I will restart that conversation on LinkedIn again.
Yeah. I mean,
I will get you involved too.
the thing about that phrase, correlation is causality, is true,
Yeah,
but all causality has to be correlated.
yeah,
So it's not,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
as you call
yeah.
it,
So
it's
sometimes it goes too
totally.
far, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I agree with you. I agree. Do you got? Shall we take a few more questions?
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah, I think they're really nice. I also really like this question because I get that a lot.
Yeah.
I train people from HR departments and those kind of things, and what they often ask me, and this is also a question like that, is as an organization, and I think more specifically as an HR department, how can we make happiness at work strategically? So it doesn't become just an HR side project.
Yeah.
Uh, this is like a question I get weekly, more than weekly.
Yeah.
How do you, you know, you've been around a lot of corporates, a lot of organizations. How do you get it into the management team, how do you do that?
It's certainly not easy.
No.
And I can think of some of the reasons why it isn't easy. Um, and they mainly revolve around time use, I think, partly. But how I do it with my clients, I am a statistician, so I have a measurement-led approach
Yeah.
to this. And so, I mean, the key is you say is to be what it says strategically. I think of it as how do you embed happiness systemically through the organization?
Mm.
And I think you have to, if you're going to get managers, team leaders, if you're going to ask them to manage happiness, you've got to have a measurement. You've got to have a KPI that you can hold them
Yeah.
against,
Yeah. Yeah.
or that is involved in it. Because and so my suggestion for that is weekly team happiness, which is that because happiness is so dynamic, it's moving up and down so much. Because the outcomes are so close to the thing, it's when we feel good, we do good work. So if we feel good one week, we do good work. The next week we feel bad, we're not going to do good work. It's very, very dynamic. It's very immediate. It's very proximal. So you have to get it into teams. You have to make it that it's going to be in the self-interest of teams and team leaders to embrace this idea, particularly team leaders.
And do
And
you use like a small questionnaire, or do you?
Yeah.
Because I also see like people get a little bit fatigued about, oh, then I have to fill in this questionnaire again, and how do you do that? How do you solve that question?
I mean, if you ask people a question, you don't act on it, and they don't see you to act on it and not involved in the action, why should they answer? So
Mm,
you have to close the feedback loop. So my methodology, I say, is measure, meet, repeat.
yeah.
We measure on a Friday. How happy were you at work this week? On a Monday, the teams get their results and they should meet. We advise them to meet and talk about the results. We ask only one psychometric question, which is how happy were you this week on a 1 to 5 scale. And so they go very unhappy, unhappy, okay, happy, very happy. They've got 5 choices. And they tend to bounce around here between okay, happy, sometimes here, occasionally here. So that's very dynamic, but then you have to talk about it. And so to create a conversation to talk about, we ask them some questions, and basically they are, what went well this week for you?
Mm,
Because too often at work, you finish some things on a Friday and you're straight to your next challenges on a Monday, and nobody stops and goes, that was good.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, people almost think it's like a weakness that we want to be appreciated. No, that's just human. You
No, but
know?
it's great. Then you start on Monday with like a kickoff,
Yeah,
sharing the things which you're proud of, which you
yeah,
accomplished, and those kind of things. That's a great.
yeah. So you meet them and you start with what's going well, and then I do have a question in there about who do you want to thank for the support they've
Okay,
given
yeah,
or
that's
to hold
great.
out.
Yeah, appreciation. Yeah, yeah,
I'm thinking about your other way, but that's how I have it at the moment.
yeah.
And then the third question we have is what's frustrating you,
Mm, yeah,
what's holding you
yeah,
back,
yeah, yeah.
and um, and we do a fourth question which is very underused, which is have you got an idea? And actually, that could be. What do I need? I don't know. That's throwing to my head now. I'm designing product online.
Okay, yeah, yeah, on the fly.
But anyway, so we have these spaces for these text based. I mean, I firstly when I started my first tool on this, I did it all with psychometrics. How happy were you this week? How interesting was your work this week? How frustrating was it? And did you feel supported? And it was all 1 to 5. And the problem was is that you still had to ask people, why are you frustrated? So why not just let them tell you straight away? I don't need a number on it, you
Yeah,
know. So I learned that I didn't have to have the top line one of how happy you are, and then what that number does strategically, systematically through the organization is you can see top down which teams are struggling, which are doing well immediately.
yeah,
You can put resources here, you can, help the ones flourish more. So that's how I embed it. And you have to have that
yeah,
signal going up and down, and you have to
yeah.
embed it
And
into weekly team happiness.
what I also hear you say, it should be a KPI.
Yes.
You should measure it, and it should be like like production,
Yeah.
and absent. The people are sick, and those things should be on the Excel sheet.
Yeah.
It should
Yeah.
be also an Excel sheet. It should be also something about happiness at work, a KPI which gets. I think that's a crucial thing.
Yeah.
Um, okay, yeah. And my experience is also that it also works to have people in leadership really like involved with
Yeah.
happiness at work, and to talk also about their own happiness at work, and to really experience it. My experience is they really start to experience it, then they become more aware of how important it is to flourish.
Yeah.
They don't not only cognitively but also emotionally.
Yeah.
Um,
Is your experience so? I think often senior leaders, sometimes senior leaders, let's not say often, sometimes
yeah,
senior leaders think, oh, this is for the staff.
exactly. Yeah,
And I'm not, we as senior leadership, we don't need to do that.
yeah, yeah,
And of course, their fear is actually if they said how stressed and unhappy they
yeah,
were,
yeah,
that would look very bad. Because if you get honest data from senior leadership teams,
yeah,
they're quite stressed.
yeah,
And
yeah. But that's true. But also, we measure happiness at work in the Netherlands. With about around 1,500 people.
yeah,
Part of them are leaders, and what we
yeah,
see is that the higher in the organizations, the higher, the happier they are. Uh,
yeah,
and not all of them, of course, but in general, and sometimes, that I think that also got something to do with personality and autonomy, those kind of things. That
So
might be, yeah.
are you asking them regularly or once a year?
Um, Once, twice a year, not weekly.
Okay, because I definitely see the data performing differently if you ask it as sort of one-offs than every week.
Hmm.
And I think what's going on is that when you go into one-off things, you ask people how happy they are at work.
Yeah.
They think more, they give more balance to status and to sort of how their career is going and less to their experience. And when you get into the weekly,
Oh,
they
that's
give
interesting. Yeah.
more value to their actual experience and less to their, they're both in there always, but at different weights. And so
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah.
in the experience work, which for me is the interesting signal because it's more dynamic and it moves, they are both important. This is,
Yeah.
in a way, in happiness research, is the difference between pleasure and meaning and how we balance between them, short and long term. But I think in the weekly data, you might find it a little bit lower, but I don't know. That'd be my hypothesis.
Yeah. Oh, that might be interesting to take a look at that. Yeah. That's, it sounds really logical, but, okay. Let's take a look at the next question. Who should be responsible when
Yeah.
you talk about happiness at work? What would be your
Well,
answer to this?
everyone.
Yeah,
Um, uh,
thought so.
Obviously, happiness is experienced within the individual,
Hmm.
and people bring themselves to work.
Yeah,
They bring their happiness or unhappiness from home into work. There's no
yeah, yeah,
clear boundary. There is independence, but there's spillover. Um, Teams are a much bigger impact on people's happiness at work than organizations.
hmm, yeah,
In my data, I do a multi-level analysis and I show that team culture is 3 times more influential than organizational culture. Well, actually, 2.8 precisely.
yeah, yeah,
And what I'm basically doing is having, I've got, thousands of people, hundreds of organizations. No, yeah, sorry, thousands of teams, hundreds of organizations. And so I can allocate people's variance in happiness. How much is it explained by the team, how much by the organization?
yeah,
And it's 28%. But well, in this particular time, it probably will move at different times, but it's 3 to 1 basically.
yeah,
And what does that mean? It means that teams are kind of where it's at in an organization.
yeah,
And there's an old adage that people join an organization and they leave a manager. That's a
yeah,
very,
yeah,
to me, that is an organizational failure because the organization hasn't supported the team leader enough, hasn't trained them enough, hasn't promoted the right person into role.
yeah,
So I think organizations are responsible for teams and teams are responsible for individuals. Individuals are responsible for themselves. But so it is all entwined, but teams for me is the interesting intervention point because it affects many people.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it goes across. So that's where I lean towards. But but in the individual, there's going to be, as you say, personality. There's going to be genetics. There's going to be what's happening in their home life. There's going to be how they're fit with their particular role is. But teams is where you can make everything better, in my opinion.
yeah, yeah.
Most
No,
things better.
but it's an interesting take, huh? Because in general the focus is like more on individuals or
Yeah,
culture. And what you say is, the team part is really an important part, and it's much more important than the like general organizational part.
yeah,
And I've seen that in other research too, that the
yeah,
team culture is much more important than the organizational culture. And
yeah,
we also see that when we look at our research in
yeah,
Holland,
yeah,
we see the same thing. The team culture is more important than the general organizational culture,
yeah,
which is also really difficult to change, the organizational culture,
yeah,
when you compare it to team culture. So
yeah.
very, very interesting. Okay, let's have a look at. I don't know if do you have a lot of experience with the difference in approach between self-managing teams and teams with a formal leader? It's
Not
sort
especially.
of
We've had some clients switch to holocracy, which you
Oh
might
yeah,
know.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And they've moved from a more orthodox, so they're already quite leading edge, these organizations, where they had very involved team leaders, and they've moved to a flatter structure of things organized in circles. I can't say that we saw a big improvement in happiness from that
Oh, you
switch.
didn't? Okay.
No. But we also I've got n equals 3 with that. I haven't got a large sample.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah, I've had
You would,
I've
uh,
had 3 clients do that, and yeah.
okay, yeah.
So who knows what specifics there were, and one of them came out back out of holacracy quite quickly. So, but there must be successful implementations of that. I just haven't been involved in them. But I wouldn't think a self-managing team will have a culture, and so it's really about the team culture.
Yeah,
The difference with a formal leader is the leader has more influence for good or bad on the team. And so the leader needs to manage their mood very intentionally, because if they get into a bad mood and they start putting that out in the team, they will have a much bigger impact than any other individual being in a bad mood. We all have good and bad moods, and it's sometimes it's good to share our troubles, but if we just start acting it out, that's going to cause negative impacts. And a team leader's negative impact will be much bigger. A team leader's positive impact will be much bigger.
yeah,
So the team leader, the formal team leader, has
yeah,
more power to influence. A self-managing team will have that power spread around,
yeah,
which is not a bad thing at all. But it would still be the resonance, the positivity resonance between the team. So I don't think it's very different. They'd probably be more facilitative, they'd be more self-managing, but they still want to manage their mood. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. In Holland, we have a big organization called Buurtzorg.
Yes.
They're self-managing, and in
Yes.
general, their happiness, their employee happiness is a little bit bigger. That's what I
Yes.
know. But when I look at our research, I can't remember any. I don't think we have any data on that. It would be interesting for the future. And I completely agree that the way the formal leader is acting is really important. What we also see is how happy the leader is, the team leader is at work, impacts the team members.
Yeah.
So if the team leader is happier, you see
Yeah.
more happy, and that's what you were talking about. That's it's
Yeah.
it's almost like a virus, both
And we,
positively and negatively.
Yeah, and it's
What is
contagious. The
happy?
happiness is contagious, and so is negativity,
Yeah, yeah,
and we see that in family data too. We see happier parents bring up happier children,
yeah,
and in that actually is a lifetime dividend that goes on the child. That there's a whole, so they're definitely running a happy ship
yeah.
is better for you as a team leader and better for the team. That's just what it is. Yeah.
Great. I have a personal question,
Yes.
something I read in your great book, which is really like amazed me. That was one of the things you're talking about the influence of having a boring job
Oh, yes.
versus having and I can remember that you wrote something like being bored at your job is 4 times
Yeah.
more impactful negatively than being stressed. Can you tell me anything about your research? How did you?
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. Also, in Holland, you see some more interesting things about. Of course, we are interested in stress, but you see also something like we call it bore out, uh,
Yeah.
something which gets traction and more interest. What
Yeah.
did you find, and how? What can you tell about it?
Should we shut this screen down?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry. Yeah,
Because I could no, no, that's absolutely fine because I could find the picture here.
Uh,
Hopefully,
you want to
so
share something?
well, there's a picture diagram of the boredom and stress. Maybe it doesn't matter, uh, the interesting thing about it is that I mean this is the graph of it
Oh
is
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah. Oh, perfect.
that boredom is four
Yeah,
times worse than
yeah,
stress.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
So I first came across this actually in my very first data set of happiness at work that I analyzed, which was about 2008, 9.
yeah.
And I was doing something for Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, CIPD in the UK. And they knew my work at the New Economics Foundation and they wanted me to comment on this data set. And I said, can I analyze the data set? And they said, oh, yeah, okay. I don't think they realize giving a statistician a data set is like giving them a birthday present. It's like, I've got real data to look at here. And they had this group of questions on emotional experience, and it asked, and I don't particularly know why the people asked it, but they asked how interesting was your work, how exciting, how rewarding, how stressful, how boring, what, I don't know, some questions. And I did a factor structure on it, and a factor structure for non-statisticians is when you reduce a set of questions to two dimensions, say. And what fell out of them was two dimensions, one of which was basically stress related and one was sort of interest related. And they weren't orthogonal, they were at an angle, but they explained the variance differently. And when you looked at a question like job satisfaction, you could see that it was two or three times more explained, I think three times then, by this interest factor rather than the stress factor.
Mm,
And so I wrote in that paper that a great job was interesting and not too stressful,
mm.
because that's sort of the conclusion.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah, yeah,
when stress gets too
yeah,
bad,
yeah.
it is really bad. But we can cope with some stress.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's where I spotted it, and I've consistently asked it in surveys since. And the beta coefficients come out, roughly four times stronger for the boring interest factor as they do for the stress factor. And what does that mean? It means that we should worry about stress, particularly, if it over a long period of time, it's going to lead to burnout. And that is, persistent bad work-life balance, persistently being not appreciated at work, going to lead to burnout. But a boring job, it's just terrible. And a boring, stressful job is even worse. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's a real
Is it also
remember.
that the interesting part, does it like buffer? Does it, that's what I read about that. But did you find that in your data that it, if you got an interesting job and it's stressful, does it help?
Yes. Yeah.
You see what
Yeah.
I
I mean,
mean? Yeah.
yeah. Effectively, it's better to have an interesting, stressful job
Yeah.
than a boring job.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
probably. It might be quite balanced. It will
Okay.
depend on different indicators. A work-life balance will be worse with an interesting, stressful job. And that is a warning indicator because it's the sort of thing that people tolerate for a while and then they suddenly leave or they suddenly collapse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So work-life balance is a sort of is a predictive variable of it's an early warning system that you've got to watch out for something because people will take poor work-life balance for a while, but it will end up and it's I mean some sectors seem to work 60-hour weeks and think that's okay. Well, if they don't mind only employing employees for 2 years, okay, but I think they're underestimating the cost of recruitment. But um,
Yeah.
so so yes, the point, and I think it's a reminder. This is why happiness is so much more than well-being, because well-being, to an extent, is absence of stress.
Mm. Yeah.
It's about psychological safety, absolutely, really, really important foundation. But you have the foundation so you can stretch, so you can. And that's where, and happiness is picking up both of these. If you haven't got any solid foundation, you're not going to be happy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that, yeah, whereas you need the stretch to be thriving. And it's a remind, and I think this is reassuring to senior leaders that included in my 5 ways that team happiness is challenge and inspire. There are team goals to be met, and it's rewarding
Yeah.
to achieve difficult things together. That is rewarding.
Yeah. And people
And
need that for happiness.
yeah,
It's very different from the passive being content with what you're doing. Eh? It's
yes,
like really going for the challenge and challenging people. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I would go as far. There's a Norwegian psychologist, Joar Tisero, who I've worked with a lot over the last 20 years and know him very well. I think we met in 2001, and we've always been talking about this. And there are sort of two types of positive emotions.
Mm.
There's some which are about maintaining stability,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there are some about driving change.
Yeah.
So
Is
contentment,
that like passive and active
yes, yeah,
on
yeah,
the emotional spectrum?
yes, yes, it is. It is picking up the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but the striving emotions are things like enthusiasm and interest and courage. They're taking you towards goals.
Yeah.
The more connecting ones, the calm, the content, the love, affection, they are building stability, whether that's relational or personal stability. But the stability is there so you can spring to the change. And happiness is both.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think especially I don't know how it is in the UK, probably similar, but in Holland, a lot of organizations are changing.
Yeah.
AI,
Yeah.
automation, a lot of things are changing. And in a way, people need to change. So when we can, when you talk about it, hey, you need to make work interesting for people with challenges, and the surroundings will do that if we help them in the right way. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
It's
It's challenges that they can be involved in the solution of.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's not just imposing challenges on them. It's like
No, no, no.
we're involved in the
Yeah,
solution.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And if we can do that, we can help to create
Yeah.
a work surrounding where they can do that.
Yeah.
Then they will flourish, and then they.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Thank you so much, Nick. I really appreciate it. Again, your book. People read it, and I know I will put in the show note. I will put the link
Yeah.
because you got a PDF with the first two parts. They can, like taste it a little bit,
Yeah.
try it a little bit, and then they can buy your book via Amazon. And how can they? What's the best way to buy it, and how is the best way to connect to you?
Yeah, so buying it is just on Amazon. And yeah, if you go to my website, nicmarks.org and books, there's a free download of the first two parts of the book. It's about a third of the book. So that, yeah, as you can say, you can taste it, you can get solidly into it.
Yeah.
And then hopefully you buy it, if you like it. And then LinkedIn is the best way. So connect with me, LinkedIn, say you've heard from me here, ask me any questions.
Any
Tag
questions?
me,
Okay, great.
tag, tag me in your posts. I do try and respond to tags in posts, and if you ask me to comment on something, I will give you my comment, as in not just the standard one. I'll think about it. Yes.
And I have experienced until now that you really do that. That's really great. Nick, thanks again. And
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. Um, Thanks. Yes.